London during the Blitz was already one of the largest and most complex cities in Europe, home to nearly 9 million people. It was a dense, fast-moving metropolis built on trade, industry and daily routines, even as war drew closer. On the surface, everything felt familiar. But above these streets, history was being written. In this video, I use modern AI to step inside the past, rebuilding moments from old photos and wartime records, so we can walk through these same spaces and see London in its darkest nights. First, we have to return to the city as it stood before the evening changed its rhythm forever. London in the late summer of 1940 was a place still holding on to its routines. The war is already reshaping Europe, but here, daily life continued with a careful sense of normality. Shop windows reflected passing buses, newspaper stands drew small clusters of readers scanning headlines about distant fronts. Office workers and shoppers moved through the streets with the quiet awareness that something is coming even if they could not yet see it. Then came the moment that changed everything. At 4:43 p.m. on September 7th, the first formations of German bombers reached the airspace over the city. The target was the docks along the River Thames, the industrial heart that fed London's trade and supply lines. Air raid sirens began their long, steady rise, their sound carrying down narrow streets and across open squares. It was not a sudden scream, but a warning that built and spread, filling the air with unease. From the ground, the sky appeared almost unchanged at first. Soft clouds drifted in the fading light of the day. Then dark shapes became visible in the distance. Below, traffic slowed. Shopkeepers pulled down shutters. People paused where they stood, looking upward, listening, deciding where to go next. As the first bombs fell, the city's horizon began to glow. Fires appeared far away. Small points of orange against the gathering dusk. Smoke rose in thin columns and bent with the wind. Underground stations and shelters filled with families, neighbours, and strangers sharing narrow platforms and quiet words. As the first sirens faded, movement slowly returned to the streets. London did not rush back to life. As if the city had learned how to exist in the space between warnings, buses were passing by buildings again, this time with windows covered by wooden boards. Shop signs hung slightly out of line, but doors remained open. In 1940, more than 8 million people lived in the city. Despite the air raids, most still had to work, eat and move through these same streets each day. The rhythm of daily life did not stop. It adapted. The market appeared thinner than before. Several stalls were missing where buildings once stood. A woman stood, counting ration coupons before receiving a small loaf of bread. By early 1941, food was tightly controlled. Each person was limited to about 1 egg per week and roughly 2 ounces of butter. The paper in her hand was folded carefully, treated as something that cannot be replaced. Nearby, a child walked past carrying a gas mask case over his shoulder. By the end of 1940, more than 38 million gas masks had been distributed across Britain. For many children, the small cardboard box became as common as a school bag. Further along the street, workers cleared bricks and shattered glass from the road. The sound of shovels and boots replaced the sound of engines. A small group paused nearby, speaking quietly about the previous night's raid. By this stage of the Blitz, dozens of major attacks had already taken place, and thousands of homes had been damaged or destroyed. A closer look at the rooftops showed that some were patched with tarps, others were open to the sky and thin lines of smoke rose from chimneys, steady and controlled. The day draws to a close, and across the city, attention begins to shift upward, toward the coming night. Darkness settled in under strict blackout rules. Even a narrow line of light could be visible from the air. Then the sirens returned, long and unbroken. By late 1940s, these sounds had become a regular part of London's nights. Between September 1940 and May 1941, the city endured 57 consecutive nights of bombing. As the warning echoed through the streets, people were already moving, carrying blankets, thermoses, and children half asleep in their arms. The first explosions registered as distant pressure rather than sharp noise. Fires appeared along the horizon, small points of light that gradually spread. On some nights, more than 500 German bombers passed overhead. By morning, entire streets could be erased from the map. Over the course of the Blitz, nearly 30,000 Londoners were killed, and close to 2 million homes across Britain were damaged or destroyed. If we look underground, platforms inside the tube stations became long, narrow sleeping areas. Families sat close together. Strangers shared space in silence. Above them, the city absorbed the impact of the night. Back over ground, smoke hangs low over the river. Fire crews move between glowing ruins, their figures small against the burning skyline. The pace of the night was slow and heavy, stretched out by waiting rather than motion. How scared people must have felt during these air raids. It is hard to imagine how damaging the Blitz really was. Let us look at some iconic locations, showcasing all the damage done. This is the morning after a heavy raid, the kind London experienced repeatedly during the winter of 1940 to 41. In the distance, St Paul's Cathedral rises above the broken rooftops. Contemporary reports would later note that during the intense raids of December 1940, more than 2,000 fires burned across the city in a single night. Many of them burned close enough to St Paul's that its survival seemed uncertain. Yet here the dome still stood. Its surface was dusted with ash, marked by small cracks and scars but structurally intact. Photographs and eyewitness accounts describe firefighters, their helmets blackened with soot, hoses laid out to extinguish fires, all at once along the pavement of ruined buildings. From here the city led toward the River Thames. The bridges were darkened under blackout conditions, their outlines barely visible. On the water, faint reflections of distant fires broke across the surface. Along the riverbanks, warehouses bore deep wounds, walls torn open, roofs collapsed inward. Over the course of the Blitz, more than 18,000 tons of bombs fell on London, and the riverfront absorbed much of that damage. Moving along the River Thames, the Houses of Parliament and Big Ben rise as powerful symbols during the Blitz. The Palace of Westminster was hit several times by German bombs, most notably in May 1941, when the House of Commons chamber was destroyed by fire. Despite the damage, Big Ben continued to stand and its clock kept ticking throughout the bombing raids. This resilience made the building a symbol of British determination and democracy surviving under attack. And yet the city was not still. Bicycles moved through the streets carrying messages. Workers began clearing debris into small piles. Windows were boarded, doors repaired. The streets were quiet, but they were not empty. London was exhausted but awake and already rebuilding. By late 1940, the scale of damage across Britain had become difficult to grasp. More than 1.4 million homes had been hit by bombing, with London bearing a disproportionate share of the destruction. And yet daily life did not fully stop. Contemporary records and photographs show people still stepping outside each morning. Shops opened when supplies allowed. Buses ran intermittently. Food was carefully measured and closely tracked. By January 1941, official rationing limited adults to roughly 1,600 calories a day. This was not a temporary inconvenience, but a structured system that shaped every meal, every queue, and every household routine. Ministry reports and personal diaries describe long lines outside shops, often made up of women who only hours earlier had been on night duty. Across Britain, more than 1 million civilians volunteered for civil defence roles. Many served as air raid wardens or fire watchers, wearing simple uniforms and carrying whistles rather than weapons. Their job was to move people towards shelters, manage blackouts, and account for neighbours in the dark after raids ended. Children appear frequently in surviving footage, often with gas mask boxes slung over their shoulders like school bags. By the end of 1939, nearly 2 million children had been evacuated from major cities. Some returned home within months. Others remained away for years, leaving many streets noticeably quieter. At night, attention shifts underground. London's underground stations became improvised dormitories. At peak periods, more than 170,000 people slept below ground each evening. Mattresses were laid along platforms. Dim lights flickered. Small, ordinary moments continued in confined spaces. The Blitz took a toll on the whole city. Entire streets appeared to end abruptly, as if cut away. In many areas, only the front wall of a building remained standing. Staircases rose toward empty air, no longer connected to anything above. These were not isolated sites. Scenes like this were repeated across London after sustained bombing. Between September 1940 and May 1941, more than 43,000 civilians were killed across Britain. Over half of those deaths occurred in London alone. Fire became one of the greatest dangers. After heavy raids, more than 2,000 fires could burn across the city in a single night. Bombs frequently shattered water mains, leaving fire crews without pressure. In response, firefighters were forced to draw water directly from the River Thames. Many worked in dense smoke surrounded by collapsing structures. Some were killed while attempting rescues. By the end of the war, over 300 members of the London Fire Brigade had been killed or seriously injured. Hospitals operated continuously, often while damaged themselves. Some surgeries were moved underground as buildings above became unsafe. In several districts, as many as 1 in 3 buildings was destroyed or severely damaged. Churches collapsed, schools vanished. Familiar routes through the city ceased to exist, replaced by brick, timber and ash. Yet contemporary accounts consistently describe what followed the raids. The morning after, civilians returned to the streets. They searched for possessions, they helped neighbours clear debris. The silence that followed the bombing was often described as heavier than the noise itself. The city appeared wounded in these reconstructions, but not broken. Standing here now, it feels like the past is still walking beside us. Every corner, every wall still carries the memory of what once stood here, and what endured. These images don't just show what London looked like, they remind us how people lived, waited, and carried on through it. If there's another moment in history you want to quietly step into, leave it in the comments. I'll take your idea and bring it to life, one careful scene at a time. Thank you for walking through this past with me.